Every state in the US boasts a unique oldest home, ranging from ancient indigenous dwellings to colonial cabins and surprising abodes. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're traveling through the US to uncover the oldest home in every state. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. Alabama's oldest home is a rustic log cabin called the Joel Edens House, built in 1808. It's a simple hall and parlor style cabin, basically 2 rooms, originally constructed on the frontier and later moved to a museum in Huntsville. Despite its modest size, it's the oldest documented building in the state, predating Alabama's statehood. In Alaska, the oldest building isn't a gold rush saloon, but a sturdy log warehouse turned home. The Erskine House in Kodiak, built around 1808, began as a Russian fur storage magazine, essentially a log fortress filled with otter pelts. Later, the Erskine family lived there, giving the house its name. Today it's the Baranov Museum, where you can still feel the history in its hand-hewn logs. Arizona's oldest houses are truly ancient. The ancestral Puebloan cliff dwellings at Navajo National Monument, dating to around 1300 AD. These include stone and mud pueblos built high in sandstone alcoves on the Shanto Plateau. With over 100 rooms each, they were high-rise apartments of their day, complete with underground ceremonial rooms. You have to hike to see them, but the reward is a peek into a cliffside ghost town where families lived 700 plus years ago. Talk about ancient real estate. The Jacob Wolf House sits on a bluff above Arkansas's White River and holds the title of the oldest house in the state. Built in 1829 by pioneer Jacob Wolf, it's a 2-story dog-trot log cabin. It survived wars, floods, and neglect, and today is a hands-on museum. In the heart of modern San Jose, California's tech hub stands the unassuming Peralta Adobe, built in 1797. This small, 2-room adobe cottage is the oldest surviving house in California. It was constructed by Manuel Gonzalez, a Spanish colonial settler, and later owned by Sergeant Luis Peralta, hence the name. With its 2-foot-thick adobe walls, no running water, and a hearth for cooking, the Peralta adobe is a far cry from Silicon Valley mansions, but it's a charming reminder of early California before the gold rush. Before we head off to Colorado to uncover an 800-year-old house, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With the Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings, pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring today's video. Now back to our tour. Colorado's oldest house is an entire ancient apartment complex tucked into a cliffside. Cliff Palace in Mesa Verde National Park was built around 1190 to 1260 AD by the ancestral Puebloans. It's North America's largest cliff dwelling. About 150 rooms and 23 kivas are ingeniously engineered into a rock alcove. With its sandstone walls and tiny doorways, Cliff Palace housed about 100 people and has stood silently for over 800 years. It's essentially a prehistoric condo, the original Colorado high-rise with a view. Visitors today can marvel at the sophisticated masonry and imagine living in a cliff neighborhood. The Henry Whitfield House in Guilford, built in 1639, is Connecticut's oldest home and America's oldest stone house. Reverend Henry Whitfield, seeking safety in the New World, built this thick-walled gray stone house that doubled as a fort against potential attacks. Its design was inspired by English manor homes with a steep gable roof and small windows for defense. Over nearly 4 centuries, the house served as a home, church, and meeting place. Today it's a museum where you can walk on the well-worn floors and touch the 17th century stone, just watch your head on the low doorways. Delaware's oldest house is the charming Reeves Holt House, built in 1665 in the town of Lewis. It began as a 1-room tavern serving sailors and travelers. Remarkably, this little wood-frame structure is still on its original foundations. St. Augustine, Florida, America's oldest city, is home to the Gonzales Alvarez House, fondly nicknamed the oldest house. The first part of this coquina stone house was built around 1726. Coquina is a local shellstone, and its walls have weathered everything: colonial wars, hurricanes, and new owners from Spanish, British, and American periods. The house evolved over time. A British owner added a wooden second story, and later a Spanish family, the Alvarez clan, gave it its final form. Now a museum, this house lets you experience colonial Florida life. You can almost hear Spanish guitar music in its breezy courtyard. It's probably the oldest surviving home in Florida, proving that sun, salt, and centuries are no match for coquina. On Georgia's Jekyll Island stands the romantic ruins of Horton House, built in 1743. This two-story tabby structure, made of concrete, oyster shells, lime, and sand, was home to Major William Horton, one of Georgia's first British colonists. Though now roofless and weathered, its shell walls still overlook the same marshes as they did in colonial times. Hawaii's oldest surviving home is Kahaleleo in Honolulu, built in 1821. This New England-style frame house has quite the origin story. It was prefabricated in Boston and shipped around Cape Horn to Hawaii. Assembled for Christian missionaries, it served as a communal home, school, and dining hall for years. In an era when most native Hawaiians lived in thatched huts, this wooden house was an odd newcomer, yet it became home to prominent missionary families and even hosted Hawaii's first printing press. Idaho's oldest house is a petite pioneer log cabin in Boise, the John O'Farrell Cabin, built in 1863. It's basically a one-room hut made of local cottonwood logs, yet John and Mary O'Farrell managed to raise 14 children in this 200-square-foot space. Illinois' oldest building started as a house, the Old Cahokia Courthouse, built around 1740 in the French village of Cahokia, just across the river from St. Louis, Missouri. This four-room colonial French home was constructed with upright logs by settlers when Illinois was part of French Louisiana. Later on, the British and Americans used it as a courthouse, so its walls heard debates in French, then English, a real multilingual landmark. After years of use, including as a tavern and even a post office, it was restored, and today you can visit it as a state historic site. The oldest house in Indiana is a mansion fit for a president, Grouseland, built in 1804 in Vincennes. This grand federal-style brick home was the residence of William Henry Harrison while he was governor of the Indiana Territory, years before he became U.S. president. In a frontier filled with log cabins, Harrison's two-story brick manor, with 13 rooms, elegant chandeliers, and even musket ports in the walls for defense, was the talk of the territory. It served as a social and political hub. Famous treaties with Native American leaders were negotiated in its parlors. Today, Grouseland is a museum where you can see Harrison's study, the formal dining room, and even bullet holes from an 1810 attack. It's Indiana's oldest house and a time capsule of early American aristocracy on the frontier. Iowa's oldest home is the Louis Ariando log house, built around 1827 in Dubuque. This weathered log cabin, just 17 by 20 feet in size, was originally the dwelling of a French-Canadian fur trader family at the Mississippi River's edge. Amazingly, it survived while nearly all other 1820 structures in Iowa vanished, partly because it was later hidden inside a larger house as an annex. The Fengro House in Shawnee, Kansas, built around 1824, holds the crown as Kansas's oldest building. It's a one-story brick cottage built by French settler Christian Fengro as an inn and stagecoach shop along the Shawnee Trail. In true frontier fashion, it wasn't fancy, just solid hand-pressed bricks and simple rooms for travelers to rest. Amazingly, part of the Fengro house still exists today, now incorporated into an electrical supply storefront in modern Shawnee. Kentucky's oldest house is the Adam Rankin House, a log cabin built in 1784 in Lexington. This sturdy log home, now covered in clapboard, was constructed just 2 years after Lexington was founded. Reverend Adam Rankin, a Presbyterian minister, built it and even held church meetings in his parlor. The house has been moved once and added onto over the centuries, but its original 1784 log core is intact. With its thick wooden walls and fireplaces, the Rankin House survived where other pioneer cabins rotted away. Today a private residence, it quietly sits as Kentucky's oldest home, blending into a modern neighborhood. The Palange Plantation House near New Roads, Louisiana, is traditionally said to date to around 1750, which would make it the oldest house in the state. The grand French Creole home, with its raised brick basement, wide galleries, and decorative dormers, certainly looks the part of an 18th century manor. Maine's oldest house could double as a tiny fortress. The McIntyre Garrison House, built by 1712 in York, is a rare surviving example of a fortified log house. With its thick timber walls, dovetailed at the corners, and small gun ports, it was constructed by settlers to withstand potential attacks on the colonial frontier. It's basically a two-story wooden blockhouse designed so you could defend it if necessary. Imagine a cabin crossed with a mini castle. The title of Maryland's oldest house goes to Brook Place Manor, originally built in 1652, though only a fragment of it still stands. This manor was once a grand brick home overlooking the local river, built by Governor Robert Brooke in the days when Maryland was young. Over time, it was extensively rebuilt, leaving just the lower portion of one exterior wall from the 1652 structure. So essentially, one brick wall of Brook Place is nearly 370 years old, while the rest is new 19th century construction. The Fairbanks House in Dedham, Massachusetts was built around 1637 to 1641 and is widely recognized as the oldest surviving wooden house in America. It's a humble farmhouse with a crooked roof and a patchwork of additions, all the quirks of a home that grew with one family for 8 generations. The Fairbanks family built it when King Charles I ruled England, and through careful tree-ring dating, it's verified to date to the late 1630s. Michigan's oldest house is the McGolben House, a low-ceiling log and timber home built before 1780 on Mackinac Island. This little dwelling is an example of French-Canadian vernacular architecture. Think thick cedar timbers, a fieldstone foundation, and not a single nail in the original construction. Minnesota's oldest home is a sturdy limestone dwelling, the Sibley House in Mendota, built in 1835. Henry Hastings Sibley, a fur trader and later Minnesota's first governor, had this 2-story house built as both his residence and the American Fur Company's regional headquarters. Its 18-inch thick stone walls kept out the harsh winters. The LaPointe Krebs House in Pascagoula, Mississippi was built in 1757 and is the oldest structure in the state. Often called Old Spanish Fort, it's actually a French colonial cottage made of tabby and cypress timbers. Recent scientific dating confirmed its 1757 construction, which shocked historians who long assumed nothing in Mississippi was quite that old. In the old French town of St. Genevieve, Missouri, you'll find the Louis Bolduc House, built in 1788 and considered the oldest house in Missouri. This colonial French home features vertical log walls set into a raised stone foundation built high to survive Mississippi River floods. Louis Bolduc was a successful French-Canadian merchant, and his house was quite high status for the time, with its shingle roof and large porches. Inside, rooms are furnished as they might have been in 1790, complete with period cookware and Bolduc family items. The house's oak timbers were hand-hewn and are still in phenomenal condition. It's now a National Historic Landmark and museum. Montana's oldest standing home is evocatively called Robber's Roost, built in 1863 near present-day Twin Bridges. Don't let the name fool you, it wasn't exactly a pirate hideout, but it was a notorious stagecoach stop and roadhouse on the Gold Rush trails. A man named Pete Daly built the 2-story log inn to cater to miners and travelers on their way to the goldfields of Alder Gulch. According to lore, some less than honest characters lurked around, giving the place its Robber's Roost reputation, though the building itself wasn't a robber's lair. Constructed of hand-hewn logs and rough boards, the structure still stands, now weathered and gray. Nebraska's oldest house is a humble log cabin in Bellevue, believed to have been built around 1835. This one-room cabin was likely built by fur traders or missionaries along the Missouri River, though its exact origins are still debated. Nevada's oldest surviving house is also one of its cutest, the Reese Johnson Virgin House in Genoa, built in 1855. Locals now call it the Pink House, and you can probably guess why. The oldest house in New Hampshire is the Richard Jackson House in Portsmouth, built in 1664. It's a classic New England saltbox, a wood frame house with a long, sloping rear roofline. Richard Jackson, a woodworker and farmer, built it using freshly cut timbers and solid boards. Over 350 years, the house saw additions and changes, but much of the original structure remains. New Jersey's oldest house takes us way, way back, the C.A. Nothnagel log cabin in Gibbstown, built between 1638 and 1643. Just think about that, 1638, when New Jersey was part of New Sweden colony. New Mexico's oldest houses aren't individual buildings so much as an entire living community. Acoma Pueblo, often called Sky City, established in the 12th century on a high mesa. Acoma is one of the oldest continuously inhabited communities in the US, with the Pueblo sandstone and adobe houses believed to date back to around the 1100s AD. These homes are multi-story, flat-roof structures made of adobe mud bricks clustered atop a 360-foot-high mesa. No electricity or running water up there. Residents historically hauled water up a sheer cliff path. Acoma has been continuously occupied for about 800 to 900 years, surviving Spanish conquests, sieges, and the test of time. Visiting Sky City, you can tour some of the ancient houses, meet Acoma pottery artisans who work in the same spaces as their ancestors, and even step inside the massive adobe church built in 1640. It's an incredible blend of past and present, living history and literal adobe homes that predate the Magna Carta. New York's oldest house is tucked away in an unlikely spot. Amidst urban Brooklyn stands the Wyckoff House, built around 1652. This small farmhouse was constructed by Peter Wyckoff, a former indentured servant turned farmer, back when Brooklyn was the Dutch town of New Amersfoort. The Wyckoff House has characteristic Dutch features, a steep roof and split Dutch doors, and was expanded over generations of the Wyckoff family, who lived there for over 250 years. Remarkably, it survived into modern times and is now a museum. North Carolina's oldest house was a surprise discovery, a small cottage in Edenton, now called the Lane House, built in 1718. Preservationists only recently identified its true age using tree ring dating. Before that, people thought the 1.5-story house was from 1900. North Dakota's oldest house is a bit of a transplant. The Sigdal House in Minot is actually a 230-year-old log house from Norway built in 1771. In 1991, the Scandinavian Heritage Park in Minot purchased and imported the house to celebrate the region's Nordic roots. Painstakingly disassembled in Sigdal, Norway, with each log numbered, it was shipped across the Atlantic and reassembled in Minot. Ohio's oldest house is tucked inside a museum for safekeeping. It's the Rufus Putnam House, built in 1788 as part of the Campus Mauritius Fort at Marietta. Rufus Putnam, a Revolutionary War veteran, led the founding of Marietta, the Northwest Territory's first American settlement, and constructed his family's log house as one block of the defensive stockade. Amazingly, the house still sits on its original site, now enclosed within the Campus Mauritius Museum to protect it. Oklahoma's oldest preserved house is Sequoia's Cabin, built in 1829 in Sallisaw. Sequoia, the famed Cherokee silversmith who created the Cherokee writing system, constructed this one-room log cabin shortly after the Cherokee Nation's relocation to Indian Territory. It's a simple rectangle of hewn logs with a stone fireplace, humble, yet the site of monumental creativity, as Sequoia is believed to have continued refining his syllabary here. The cabin was lived in by his family until 1844. Oregon's oldest house has a bit of a mystery shrouding it. Known as the Molalla Log House, it is a 2-story log cabin believed to date back to the 1790s, potentially making it the oldest building in the Pacific Northwest. It doesn't look like your typical Oregon pioneer cabin. In fact, its construction style is unusual with tightly fitted timbers and no nails. Historians think it might have been built by early Canadian fur trappers in the very early 19th century. The cabin was rediscovered in the 1980s, disguised as a barn on a farm near Molalla. After realizing its significance, preservationists moved and reassembled it at Hopkins Demonstration Forest. Pennsylvania's oldest surviving house is thought to be the Lower Swedish Cabin, built circa 1640 to 1650 on Darby Creek and Drexel Hill. This sturdy log cabin was built by Swedish and Finnish colonists who settled the area when it was part of New Sweden. Amazingly, it's withstood the test of time over 380 years and remains largely intact. Rhode Island's oldest house is often cited as the Governor Peleg Sanford House in Newport, parts of which date to the late 1600s. Though modified over time, it remains the oldest house in Rhode Island, a rare survivor from the 17th century and a city better known for 19th century mansions. South Carolina's oldest home is Middleburg Plantation, a lovely cypress wood plantation house built in 1697 near the Cooper River. Benjamin Simmons, a French Huguenot settler, built Middleburg as a rice plantation homestead. Over 3 centuries later, the same house still stands, making it not only the oldest wood frame building in South Carolina, but also the state's oldest house. South Dakota's oldest house is the Herman Luce Cabin, built in 1871 on the banks of Lake Herman. Compared to East Coast homes, 1871 might sound recent, but remember, Dakota Territory was only open to homesteaders in the 1850s, so this is pioneer era for the region. The Luce family lived there for years, even as they built a larger house later on. Eventually, the cabin was abandoned, but in the 1930s it was rescued when Lake Herman State Park was created and the state preserved it on site as a historic structure. Tennessee's oldest house is called Longmeadow, a log home originally built in 1762 in what is now Burgoynesville. Constructed by William Young as a frontier farmstead, Longmeadow began as a simple log cabin and, like many early homes, was expanded over the 1800s as prosperity allowed. The oldest section is a log 2-story structure, incredibly early for Tennessee, since settlement was sparse that soon after the French and Indian War. Longmeadow's logs are visible in parts of the interior, and you can see the craftsmanship of dovetailed corners, but from the outside, you'd never guess the secrets buried within its walls. Everything's bigger in Texas, except the oldest house, which is actually a quaint 1-story adobe. The so-called Spanish Governor's Palace in San Antonio was built in 1749 and served as the residence and headquarters for the captain of the Presidio of San Antonio. Despite its grand name, it's not a palace in size, more like a long bungalow, but it was the seat of Texas government when this region was part of New Spain. Constructed of thick adobe walls with a beautiful keystone above the door bearing the Spanish coat of arms, it has 10 rooms laid out around a courtyard. Over the centuries, the building saw Texas go from Spanish to Mexican to Republic to U.S. territory, and at one point it even became a pawn shop. Thankfully, the city saved and restored it in the 1930s. Now it's a museum where you can stroll the charming courtyard with its fountain and orange trees and peek into rooms with original hand-carved doors and cedar ceilings. Utah's oldest houses are remnants of the Hovenweep Castle and Towers, built by ancestral Puebloans roughly 700 plus years ago, around the 13th century. At Hovenweep National Monument, straddling Utah and Colorado, you'll find impressive stone structures perched on canyon rims and balanced on boulders. These aren't castles in the medieval sense, but rather multi-story stone houses and lookout towers that formed a village. They have nicknames like Square Tower, Hovenweep House, and Hovenweep Castle, the latter being a pair of tall structures with mysterious windows and T-shaped doors. The ancestral Puebloans, related to those at Mesa Verde, built them with skillful masonry, no mortar, and aligned with celestial events. By about 1300 AD, they were abandoned, but the structures remain in remarkable shape, with some walls still perfectly plumb, even after centuries of erosion. Vermont's oldest home is the Moore Wright House and Panel, dated roughly from 1750 to 1760. This little 18th century homestead still peeks out from under maple trees, and probably will for generations to come. Virginia's oldest house is the flamboyant Bacon's Castle, built in 1665 in Surry County. Unlike the modest cottages of most colonials, Bacon Castle is a brick mansion with attitude. It's the only surviving example of high Jacobean architecture in the US, featuring brick finials and twisted chimney stacks. Arthur Allen, a wealthy planter, built it and originally called it Allen's Brick House. It got the name Bacon's Castle after Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, when rebel leader Nathaniel Bacon's followers seized the house and fortified it, using it as their castle for a few months. Today it's a museum where you can see 17th century English-style gardens, original mahogany paneling, and some of the oldest English furniture in America. Washington State's oldest house is the Covington House, a log cabin built in 1848 in the Vancouver area. Richard and Anna Covington, English immigrants and educators, constructed this cabin by hand from local fir logs. What's special is that it wasn't just a home, it doubled as a school and a hub of social life in the early settlement. West Virginia's oldest house is the Robert Worthington House, also known as Piedmont near Charlestown. Its oldest portion, a single-story stone section, was built around 1735 by Robert Worthington, a Quaker settler. This humble limestone wing, essentially a fortified cabin, was among the first homesteads in the Shenandoah Valley when it was still part of Virginia. In 1784, a new owner, Dr. John Briscoe, constructed a large two-story brick Georgian addition onto it, effectively turning the quaint stone cottage into one wing of a grander house. The combined structure showcases two eras, 1730s frontier stonework and 1780s refined brickwork, all still attached like a historical architectural sandwich. Piedmont stayed in the Worthington family for generations and retains much of its original character, white plank floors, massive fireplaces, etc. As a private residence, it's not generally open to tour, but its significance is well noted by historians. Wisconsin's oldest house is patriotically dated. The Tank Cottage in Green Bay was built in 1776. That's right, while the Declaration of Independence was being signed in Philadelphia, a French-Canadian fur trader named Joseph Roy was building this cozy cottage on the banks of the Fox River. Wyoming's oldest house harks back to the Mountain Man era. The original Fort Bridger cabins, built in 1843, are regarded as the first permanent structures in what is now Wyoming. Legendary trapper Jim Bridger and his partner Louis Vasquez established Fort Bridger as a trading post along the Oregon Trail, building two double log cabins connected by a corral. Those early log houses served as trading rooms, a blacksmith shop, and rudimentary living quarters for Bridger's crew and passing immigrants. Although the original cabins were later destroyed, the site today features reconstructed cabins on the very spots Bridger stood. From ancient cliff dwellings and pueblos to colonial cottages and frontier cabins, the oldest houses in each state showcase a stunning patchwork of American history. These homes have survived against the odds, allowing us to trace our roots back hundreds or in some cases over 1,000 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Which of these old houses was your favorite? Let me know down below in the comments section. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Victorian Society in America for sponsoring this video. Check out their link in the video description to learn how you can get involved today. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.